Hi, and welcome to Epiphanies. I'm Reverend Jessie Brandon, and I'm a life cycle celebrant as well as an ordained metaphysical minister. And this is my opportunity to bring together my two loves, books and people. And today we're talking about the Tao Te Ching by Stephen Mitchell, and my guest is Chris Love. He'll be joining us in just a moment. But I wanted to read you something first, just to give you an indication of what we're doing. So the Tao Te Ching can be translated as the Book of the Eminence of the Way, or simply the Book of the Way. About Lao Tzu, its author, there's practically nothing to be said. He may have been an older contemporary of Confucius, and even the meaning of his name is uncertain. But the information that has come down to us is highly suspect. So basically, people think of Lao Tzu as a hermit, a dropout from society, dwelling serenely in some mountain hut, unvisited except perhaps by the occasional traveler. But it's clear from his teachings that he deeply cared about society. And if society means the welfare of one's fellow human beings, his book is, among other things, a treatise on the art of government, whether of a country or of a child. So without further ado, let's have Chris join us. Hi, Chris, come on in.
Hi. Good to see you here, Jessie.
Good to see you too. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
All right. Please make yourself comfortable.
I shall.
And make yourself a cup of tea.
Wow,
And I forgot to tell you, my viewers, make yourself a cup of tea and get into your comfy chair, and let's have a listen to what Chris can teach us. First, I'm going to read you his biography. So, Chris Love of lovingspirit.ca has been interested in human consciousness and yoga for 28 years. His journey has taken him twice to India and Nepal, where he trained to become a yoga teacher. He lived homeless for 2 years under the guidance of his native Canadian teacher. So Chris is a yogi, a philosopher, a farmer, and a cook. Christopher lives his life following the way, letting things happen as they should. So there we have it.
There we have it.
So Chris, obviously this book is well used.
Yes.
What brought you to this book?
Well, as I said, I've always been interested in why. Why are we born? Why do we even live here? This whole human existence, and existence itself.
Yeah.
So while I was in university studying Western philosophy, I was struggling. I found it very dry. There was no insights or answers. It was more of an intellectual discourse about potential. But really, it meant nothing.
Yeah.
So I started exploring Eastern philosophies, and I picked up this book in the midst of some turbulent periods in my life, and I actually flipped it open to this one right here, number 44. I was wondering what I should do, where I should go, and it said, fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way that things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you.
Wow.
When I read that, I realized that the things that I was pursuing were meaningless. They were empty,
Yeah.
and they were going to go nowhere. But if I could find happiness just with what I had, as little as it was, then I would have happiness forever.
Right.
Now, of course, the moment of realization and the full understanding took several years of application, but
I hear you there.
this was really what got the ball rolling for me to fully engage in sort of a more spiritually oriented lifestyle than a materialistically founded lifestyle.
Right. Okay.
Which is what I found was empty and lacking in the Western style of philosophy, is that it kind of, spirit was something out there, and then there was mind, and it was all rational, logical. Or it was spiritual, but in the sense that it was delineated by the strict dogmas of a particular religion, so it didn't allow freedom of thought.
Right.
Whereas when we talk about the way, well, we can't really talk about it. As Lao Tzu says, the way that can be talked about is not the true way.
Yes.
Because
I love that.
the way is just how things are. You know, what can we say is the path of a flower? I mean, it's its unfolding, but it's also when it dies and leaves its seed, and all of it is just its path. But that's the way.
Yeah.
So it isn't any one of those things. It is all of those things, and each of those things, and you know.
Yeah. It can become quite quite involved, and yet it's really quite simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in our modern era, things are so complex. And I mean, we're at a moment's notice. We can be on beck and call because of our little magic boxes.
Right.
On all of these things, instantly distracted.
And isn't it amazing how we all lived without those cell phones 20 years ago, and yet now we can't live without them, and they are such, what do you call it? They pull you away, a distraction from from the right thing.
Because nothing will be better over there than it is right here and right now. If you're not happy right here and right now, going over there isn't going to make you even 1 ounce happier. Or if it does, the moment you leave there, you'll become unhappy. You have to be happy now where you are, or you'll never be happy anywhere at all. And that's the essence of the Tao.
Now, do you think his message is the pursuit of happiness, or is it the pursuit of peace?
Happiness comes out of a result of having a state of inner peace and clarity. Because true happiness is independent of external events.
Right.
It's an inner state of sort of contentment and satisfaction. And that's very difficult to obtain. I mean, the Stone said it can't get no satisfaction. And we live in a society that's based on dissatisfaction. I get something new today, they've already got the new one along the line so that I can be dissatisfied with what I own and need to purchase the next thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, HD isn't good enough, we have to have Super HD or Mega HD so that you can see every pore in my skin if you want to. Do we need it?
Yeah. Now, how many lessons are in the Tao?
There's 81, which numerologically is significant. 9, 8 plus 1 is the number of completion.
Okay. Do you think that's why he did it?
More than likely, yes. Numerology was a very well-entrenched philosophical system throughout the world, but particularly in China and India at the time of this being written. So he would have known the significance of numbers.
Okay.
And exactly the aphorism that I read was number 44, which is not quite in the middle of the book, but the double 4 number is foundational, and 4 is a number of pattern, logic, a solid foundation, like a square. So if you have 2 squares side by side, you're reinforcing that foundation. So I don't think that anything in this book is arbitrary, although he may or may not have intentionally done it that way. That's how the way works.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, it just is.
It just happens.
Now, did you happen to see Wayne Dyer's book when he studied? He said, I think he studied 4 different translations of the Tao and then came to an understanding of what he thought was the best one. And I don't know if he quotes Stephen Mitchell in his book. Do you know the book that I'm talking about?
I do know it. I have not personally read that one, and I picked up this book. This is how I live life. So I walked into the little bookstore. I go, I need something for inspiration. I'm looking around. This book literally fell off the shelf.
Wow.
There you go.
The very first time?
The very first time. And so I
Wow.
picked it up and opened it to that particular thing and read that, and then voila, that's it.
So how many years is that?
That would be when I was, so it would be 24 years ago.
So you were already taking...
I was already involved with philosophy and inquiry and individual study, but I wasn't really spiritual yet. I was still well entrenched in the Western ideology. And this was kind of when I was about 22 was when things were starting to shift for me, and I was starting to break away from the strictness of my Western upbringing and start opening myself up to more.
It's very difficult to break away from that, isn't it?
Well, because you're enculturated with it.
Yes.
I mean, it's what you know. You've been steeped in it. Like, I'm steeping my tea right now, and I'm steeping, this bag of chai. If I throw peppermint in there, it's going to take a while for the peppermint to infuse itself also to make the chai take on that flavor.
Yes.
Especially if this has been steeping longer, so the molecules have been pushed out more with the chai. So now my peppermint has to compete to get in there.
Right. So is it the book that led you to go to India?
It was in combination with a variety of factors all sort of happening at once. Again, the way.
Yeah.
There's never one thing. There's a variety of factors all coming together. And so I was at a friend's house, and we were just discussing life, and I was just dissatisfied. And I was going back to university for another semester, and I'm like, why? Why am I paying these people money? They aren't. I'm getting nothing. You know, I'm treading water here, trying to keep myself inspired, but there's no hope.
Yeah.
I literally felt there was no hope. And my friend's sister came back from India, and she was just all about India. And she wasn't even particularly into the metaphysics or the spiritual, you know, for her it was a big party trip. But
Yeah.
there was just, she had something about her, I don't know what it was. And people I've often heard call it the India vibe or the India energy. And I said, that's it, I'm going to India. And from that moment forward, it still took a couple of years for everything the mechanisms of the universe to come together. But then 2 years later, I was on a plane and flying to India.
Wow.
And the first time I went to India, it was just sort of covered the whole country, you know, you don't know what to expect. It went from one place to the next. And it was amazing, and I saw wonderful things. I happened to be in India at the time that Mother Teresa died. Now, I wasn't in Kolkata at the time, but I was in Dharamsala, which is where the Dalai Lama has his residence. And he wasn't there when I arrived, but he came back from Europe because Mother Teresa died, and I was able to have an audience with some other Westerners, with the Dalai Lama.
Oh, very
Got
cool.
to even shake his hand. It was
Oh,
very,
wow.
very satisfying experience.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. So, have you ever purchased this book for someone else?
I was going to say one of the things, I had a good friend when I was living down in Port Colborne, and he has a little restaurant called the Smokin' Buddha, Kevin Eklund. And I was leaving to go to India the second time. And I had been sort of, I'd helped him with his business, been a bit of a counsel, helped him through some troubled waters, you know, to get himself grounded. And he said, what am I going to do without you here to help me out? And I said, wait, there's something I can do for you. And I went down to the bookstore and I purchased this book and I gave it to him. And I said, whenever you're feeling confused or in doubt or you don't know what you're feeling conflicted in any ways, just take this book, open it to wherever you are, look down and see what it says. And right here it just says, the generals have a saying, rather than make the first move, it is better to wait and see. Rather than to advance an inch, it's better to retreat a yard. This is called going forward without advancing or pushing back without using weapons. There is no greater misfortune than underestimating your enemy. Underestimating your enemy means thinking that he is evil. Thus you destroy the three treasures and become yourself an enemy. When two great forces oppose each other, the victory will go to the one that knows how to yield. So in that circumstance, it might not seem to apply to you, but what I get from it is, if something is opposing you, don't push back against it. Yield to it. Just let it happen.
Yeah.
And when it is provided no resistance, it actually falls away. It's your resistance that supports it.
Absolutely. Of course, I just got to interrupt you for a moment.
No
We're going to
worries.
take a break and we'll be back. So just heat up your tea and plump your pillow. Come on back to Epiphanies in just a moment. Thanks. and welcome back to Epiphanies. I'm here with my guest, Christopher Love. I call him Chris, and yet I noticed you wrote Christopher. What do you prefer?
Well, since I've been married, I go with Christopher. Again, coming back to numerology, Christopher's a 4, so it's stable and foundational. Chris is a 5. That's adventurous, magical, travel the world.
Yeah,
Yes.
interesting.
So I've opted to go with Christopher to harmonize my family life.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool. So while we were on break, I picked up your book and I opened it just randomly to see what it would tell me. And it says, throw away holiness and wisdom, and people will be 100 times happier. Throw away morality and justice, and people will do the right thing. Throw away industry and profit, and there won't be any thieves. If these 3 aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course. Now, I know what that means to me. Can you tell me what you have come to understand?
Things happen around us all the time, but they only affect us when we reach out and touch them, when we reach out and grab them, or when we engage them. But when we sit serenely in the center, we watch them like a movie pass by, but we're unaffected by them.
Now, Chris, how do you live your life as a philosopher and a yogi and a farmer and a cook? How do you do all of that and yet still remain at the center?
Well, the cultivation of practice.
Okay.
And there's nothing you will not get better at that you don't practice. If you practice, you get better.
Right.
So I've been a practicing yogi, been practicing meditation for many years. And so it has become part of me. So there's no effort involved anymore.
Right, okay.
But in the beginning, of course, substantial amount of effort had to be involved. I had to consciously desire to be more present and less distracted by the worldliness. And consciously just accept myself as I am. When I started to accept myself as I am, instead of thinking I needed to change or be better, I got better. I used to be a smoker of cigarettes. And what happened is I realized that whenever I thought I had to quit smoking, resisting it, I kept smoking more and more and more. And eventually, it just fell away. One day, I just decided, well, I'm done with this. But I kept smoking for another month. And each time I smoked after I said I was done with it, I disliked it more and more until the point where I put out my final cigarette and I never have had a craving since. It was just extinguished.
Wow, okay.
But I didn't resist it. Even though I said I was done, I kept smoking. I didn't criticize I guess in my own mind, but it just, each time it reinforced how much I didn't want to do it.
Okay.
But I didn't resist it. I just allowed it.
And would you say that that is the biggest battle, is the resistance?
It is. Because we have in our mind that we want it to be this way, this is the right way, this is how it should be. But it's this way. And so we struggle because this way is actually how it is.
Yes.
And how we want it to be is this way. And there's this confusion and the chaos and the inner turmoil. But when we go, oh, this is the way that it is, then everything's at peace. You're not in conflict with what's happening. But it requires you to actually live in the present moment. And you know, of course, the power of now. My wife talked about the new earth. All of these things are about being present in the moment. And that's what this book, thousands of years ago, this book was written. And it's still about the same thing. Human problems have not changed that much.
No. And in fact, instead of becoming more conscious and centered and present, I think that we've looked externally for everything and gotten busier.
That's
That's made it
true.
Yeah, that's made it so much worse. So it's like the pendulum has swung way out here. So what do you think the hope is for us to come back?
Interestingly, the hope is provided here in the Tao. I believe that I mentioned, I marked it off. He says,
Now, have you ever thought, Chris, about having, do you know what a satsang is?
I very well do know what a satsang is.
Have you ever thought about leading one? Is that something that one can
Well,
just take up?
someone can just take that up, and I have done some satsangs for certain, and part of our teacher trainings involve some satsangs as well. People have to be motivated. Most people don't even know what it is, so it's hard to get them to come to it, and they already have preconceived ideas about this type of stuff. So I found that it's much easier to accomplish in the larger center where people are more accustomed to it. I found Barrie has been difficult to maintain over a long period of time.
Yes, I had a friend who traveled, mostly she traveled to Chicago, but occasionally there would be ones in Toronto that she would go to. And tell me what that word means.
A satsang is a coming together of like-minded people.
Okay.
And the Sangha is of the same word, but the Sangha comes from the Pali language, which was another Sanskrit derivative. But satsang is from the Sanskrit, and they have a similar meaning in that it's like-minded people coming together to share in a similar purpose. And a satsang is usually a devotional service towards a god or gods, or to the absolute, as it were.
So do you have to have a particular master?
Again, it depends on the school of philosophy. So some would strictly argue that one must have an absolute guru, and then others not so much. So I see as a practitioner, I practice what's known as Tantra Yoga, which again has a whole bunch of misconceptions about it in our Western idea.
Anastasia and I have talked about that, yeah.
Because Tantra allows for sexuality to be integrated as part of your spiritual life, doesn't mean that it's the yoga of sex.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
a huge extrapolation, you know, because if it is, then it's also equally the yoga of taking a poop. Because you need to be as equally present in both activities. If you are not, then you are not living your spiritual life.
Right. Okay.
So if you can't be as invested in one as the other, then you aren't really practicing Tantra. So this is where a lot of people think that it's something that it isn't.
Yeah.
And really it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing. Tantra is weaving every single aspect of your life together in a worship of the divine.
So could one structure a satsang around the Tao?
Of course. Of course. You could come together, you could talk about the Tao, somebody could read what they had and their explanation or their feeling on it, and then you could meditate together with it. You could do anything. You could do anything.
Did you find what you were looking for
I
yet?
have not. And
Isn't that amazing? You probably could lay your hand on it in a second if we weren't on the show
on
here.
TV.
Yeah.
But anyways, it basically says if you want something to flourish first, if you want something to pass away first, you have to allow it to flourish.
Really? Okay. So.
Well, think about it. If you have a rose, it's going to flower and then it's going to crumble away. That's the nature of everything. So if something's bothering you and you think you have to get rid of it, it's going to get rid of itself on its own.
Right. Okay, I get you there. All right. So just let it have its natural growth and then release.
Because if you can pluck it, but it's still going to have it's still going to be a flower for a while until it decays. It is going to take that time. Everything has its time. Because the way is perfect. So if something comes into being, it will emerge, have its period of existence, and then return to its source.
Exactly.
Everything.
Yeah.
And the length of that duration is, of course, determined by the karmas of that individual thing that comes into existence. Some things come into existence for a microsecond, but they have just as much of an impact on something that comes into existence and lasts for 10,000 million years. It's hard for us to comprehend that because we look at life in a linear, logical way, but the Tao is beyond that. So the saying is, in the beginning was the Tao. And then the One, this great oneness, became two. And once it was two, once consciousness could be aware of itself and identify itself as something separate, then it allowed all of the other things in creation to take place. And this is what working out here is just that karma. The one splitting into two, creating the potential for everything.
Wow.
But the Tao is still, even though these two are in play, the Tao still accepts that there is the overriding consciousness which is aware that even these two are just a play of light and shadow, just light and dark mixing together, creating the different textures, the different tendencies, the different ways that we can be in this experience called life.
We touched briefly in your bio on all the things that you do. I know that you're a farmer. Where are you a farmer?
McBride's Organic Farm. You can
Right.
find them at mcbridesorganic.farm. It's that easy.
It's that easy.
It's
Cool.
that easy.
And then, so do you use the Tao even when you cook? Because I know Anastasia told me that you're very present when you cook, and it's a whole family.
I try to be completely doing what I am doing when I am doing it, whatever it is that I am doing.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
that's the best that I can do, is just to be there doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, sometimes I'll chant mantras or do other things, but regardless of what I'm doing externally, I'm just trying to, when I'm cooking, I'm trying to cook, not think about tomorrow.
Right. Just be in
Just
that
to
moment.
be in that moment. You feel the onions burning my eyes, smell things as they're happening, and just be present with it.
So if I was to say to you, you've probably already shared it, but let's see. What is an epiphany that you can share with us today that, made it quite an impact in your life?
Specifically related to this, or just in general? Just
Anything.
in general. I was a
Briefly.
miserable, depressed young man. I was walking down the street one day, and this voice that I've heard often since then boomed into my head and said, "You can change right now and be as happy as you want to."
Really?
And I said, "You're right, but I'm not ready yet." It took me 5 more years to be ready.
Cool.
But at that moment, I knew that I was the master of my own destiny.
Right. That is superb. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm so glad you took the time to be with us today. And thank you, viewers, for watching Epiphanies. I do hope you'll join me again Sundays at 8 p.m. Thanks for watching.